And raise your hand if you are currently growing or producing your own food at home. Okay. Raise your hand or keep it up if you wish you were growing or producing more food. All right, that's a lot of folks right there. Another one.
Wish if you were growing.
Raise your hand if you are on a first name basis with a local farmer or food producer in your area. All right, a few of you. That's great to see. And then the last question, little change of gears here. Raise your hand if you've ever faced a health challenge that had you feeling helpless or hopeless. I'm gonna raise mine. All right, you are in the right spot. So I'm gonna introduce our panel here, starting at the far end. Danny Peratt is an herbalist and founder of Peratt Food and Beverages and Herbal Infusions Kitchen, which bridges the gap between herbal supplements and the food and juice industry. Think easy to ingest, potent, very tasty elixirs and sauces that feature adaptogen herbs and mushrooms. Next to him, William Padilla Brown is the founder of Mycosymbiotics and MycoFest, an annual mushroom and arts festival celebrating all things mycology. He is a permaculture designer, a bioeconomics consultant, and an environmental regeneration enthusiast who devotes much of his time and energy to improving local ecology and community. Next to him, Covalent McDermott is a plant and soil scientist, urban ecologist, and founder of the Pineal Room. He is a promoter of nutrient-dense foods, ecotherapeutic activities, and spiritual practices to raise ecological consciousness through education and lifestyle. Kelly Crine is a co-founder of the Sovereigns Collective, an intentional private membership association of natural health enthusiasts who share resources for members to utilize on their health journey. And last but not least, Tom Cowan is an alternative medicine doctor, speaker, and author of numerous books on health and medicine. He is a founding board member and vice president of the Weston A. Price Foundation. Quick round of applause for our panel. We're going to get started. All right, the first one, sort of a slow ball, but maybe not. The bit of ancient wisdom from Hippocrates goes, "Let food be thy medicine, and medicine be thy food." It sounds simple. But what are some of the challenges we face in modern society when trying to apply this bit of wisdom to our lives? Who wants to kick us off?
I think that one of the biggest challenges is the modern industrialized food market that most of us have become acclimated to as what food is. Most of the times when I go to the grocery store, I shop maybe 10 to 20% of the grocery store because the other 90% is a bunch of things that's not food to me. And a lot of this happened after the World Wars. A lot of industrialized equipment was turned over, and a lot of the applications that were utilized for military rations became commonplace across the country and creating shelf-stable preserved foods for the industrialized modern market. On top of that, 300 years of monocrop agriculture. What that means, mono, single crop. We have crops that we grow, where we grow one field of one crop, pulls all of the same nutrients out of one field of grass, so we have to keep applying all these synthetic nutrients. Again, something that is the production of the world wars. One of the big things that sparked the world wars in the early 1900s was the widespread understanding of chemistry, and that's why the United Nations formed, was to help to moderate the chemical abuse that was going on between countries. A lot of the countries that invested so much into these chemicals eventually shifted the chemical utilization from war weapons into synthetic fertilizers and pesticides and herbicides for farming, because they didn't want their investments to go to waste. So that sparked industrial chemical agriculture also. Farming this way depletes nutrients from the land, and it also introduces a lot of chemicals into our diet that weren't there more than 100 years ago. So a lot of our bodies are getting adjusted and used to all of these new things that have never been in our diets before. And the soil is washing away. I don't know how many of you guys have driven down the road in the farmlands when it's raining, but you see all the water on the side of the road. It's all brown or it's all red. All of that is the nutrients and minerals that were in the soil washing away because there's not enough buffers in the soil. There's not enough plants with deep enough roots that are in the soil to hold the soil together. So it's all washing away into the creeks, into the rivers, causing algal blooms and things like this, and then washing away into the ocean and not in our foods. So the foods that we're receiving in the grocery stores are oftentimes like, I mean, I can use one fact that I can remember in my head, but oranges 100 years ago are up to 4 times more nutrient dense than oranges that you can get at the store today, just because the soil that they were growing in was more nutrient rich. So a lot of times the foods that we're eating don't even have the full flavor or the full nutrient profiles that they need to have, and that's why we end up taking supplements and vitamins. And a lot of times the processed foods in the processing is split up into different parts. So people will hear the word Whole Foods and they think that it's just a fancy grocery store, but Whole Foods is a food that hasn't been split up into parts. You get a cereal and they took out all the nutrients and then they sell it back to you in a multivitamin. So I don't want to keep ranting, but that's my little bit on there.
Well, I think that covers nicely, Will, thank you for that, and I think that covers nicely the food aspect, and I wonder if we could jump in real quickly to the other half of that, which would be medicine. So you've looked at how the food industry has maybe corrupted what is in our grocery store. It's not food, they're food products. But what about our approach to medicine, and how do we perhaps take a look at that under the similar lens? Kelly or Tom, do either of you want to jump in?
Things that we do at the Sovereigns Collective is we have a community healing day. And the primary part of that, so the Sovereigns Collective is an intentional membership-only healing center where we get to decide what's going to be best for people, and you get to help us to know what you need from us. So we have a community healing day once a month to certainly bring our services and what we have to offer to people who might not be able to financially join in, but also a chance to bring members together and for people to start figuring out how to support each other, because that's something we've gotten so away from. People lived for so many years in tribes and everybody helped each other and supported each other, and we've gotten way away from that. So yeah.
And a number of us on stage are in industries or fields that overlap food and medicine. So Danny, Will, Covalent, you're working in fungal medicine, plant medicine, adaptogen herbs. So someone out there who is completely uninitiated or doesn't incorporate any of these currently into their diet, can you walk us through why they should and where they could get started?
Yeah, I think you hit it right on the head. Like right where the food and medicine come together, I think there's been a mistake that we've kind of created a gap where there shouldn't be a gap. Herbs are not medicine, herbs are food. And if we look at it as if they are medicine, then we start to treat it like they're medicine, and that is where confusion comes in. So, you know, I think it's imperative for everybody, and probably on best behalf of the United States, for herbs to be part of the food pyramid, because they at this point, with the lack of soil nutrients, with the piss poor variety of food available, what is being marketed and pushed towards the people, there's no question that we have to start to bridge the gap. And how are we going to do that is, you know, in my opinion, where there was a big opportunity for business, where I can take these beautiful natural substances that are available very easily for everyone to get and put them in things that are convenient and familiar. And then that's a really, really easy way for people to start throwing herbs and supplements into their diet, into their lifestyle, into their beverages, just their everyday thing, like ice cream. Okay, have some astragalus root inside your ice cream. Have some shilajit in your juices.
Let's talk about that specifically, just so we can educate the audience and myself as well on shilajit, for example. I'd love to know a little bit more about that, why you incorporate it, why you offer it, what it's doing to the body, and why a person in the audience should be interested in maybe putting that in their body.
Well, shilajit is a really, really unique substance. It comes from mountain ranges at certain times of the year, at certain altitudes, and kind of seeps out like a tree sap. But it's made from ancient forest systems being condensed with tectonic plate movement, and they're kind of like broken down into these phytonutrients, minerals, vitamins, enzymes, all kinds of different unique substances that are no longer in our soil systems anymore because of, repetitively how terrible we do at creating food for the public. So having this substance and being able to consume it, it has a lot of benefits on your nutrient intake, which also boils over to your immune system function. And shilajit in itself has unique properties to helping reduce your stress levels. I mean, there's a very long list of benefits for your nervous system, for brain health. I think it's one of the best kept secrets in supplements and food and medicine, quote unquote.
It's like a tar, almost like a tar-like substance. Take a little dab, put it in some hot water, and then you drink it. Yeah. Covalent, another, nutrient-dense food that bridges this gap possibly between food and medicine, one that you work with is sea moss. And you've done some work around sea moss, specifically in populations that perhaps were suffering from any sort of medical conditions. And I'd love to learn a little bit more about sea moss, how you got into that, and why the audience might want to look into that specifically.
Thank you very much. Well, I didn't want to start with sea moss. Oh my gosh, I have so much to say, but I'm going to. Can I just piggyback off some earlier questions?
Absolutely.
All right. Yeah. So when you mention to that very famous saying, make your food be your medicine, and we start saying that medicine also be the food, I start to ask the question to myself, what is food? And I ask my panelists too, what is food? If food should be the medicine, and the medicine should also be the food, what is food? And then you will realize that everything that we're eating is incomplete, because a food should be a system. And a system, we know how a system works. It receives and it sends out information. Like you are a biological battery. If you agree that you are a biological battery right now, mobile one that is, you can move, but you require charging. Now you are sitting here in an ecology. This is an ecosystem, but everybody here is being recharged magnetically from the magnetism of the earth and from the solar power of the sun, right? So we have the positive electricity. So we are being charged from the sole of the feet, from the earth, and from the crown by the sun. So that is what locks you into becoming a biological battery. So what is food? What is food? It simply means that you are electricity. Hydroelectricity, because you are predominantly water too, right? And you require a lot of minerals, right? So you are an electromagnetic being as well. So when we talk about food, if it is not of that electric source, then is it really food? Is it really medicine? Now we are consuming sunlight energy, that is food. So consuming the sunlight energy, that is food to me. Taking off your shoes and grounding yourself on the earth, that is food to me. Whatever you listen to, that is food to me. You get me? So when we start to become ecologically conscious, then you realize that the things that you are consuming is poison. They actually corrode your electricity, your battery. None of this is ever food. The food we take for granted is what we are now starting to acknowledge when we sit right here and sunbathe, right? So when we talk about like food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food, this is where I want to start from. Ecological consciousness. Walking through a forest with high stress level on entry and coming back the next end with a low level of cortisol. That's food. That therapy is food. That's healing. So that's where I want to start, and I'm going to make the connection with CMOS here. When the pandemic struck, and my community suffered the most and still suffering now, the melanated community, we're still suffering because we had no infrastructure, even though there is no infrastructure generally speaking. The infrastructure of the US is very poor. We take for granted the natural ecosystem, you know? But did you know that 97% of the landscape surface of the United States is still covered with green plants? Only 3% urbanized. So why are we talking about climate change and all these things? Why? Think about it. If majority of this place is green and 3% is urbanized, it simply means that ecologically speaking, this can have very pronounced impact globally. That is what it means. What we do ecologically, it can have pronounced impact globally. Because if we use that 3% space and continue to make it a hot spot, literally speaking, very hot, generating heat, that temperature will be moved by the wind to other places, right? It can scale from regions to become a global impact. Just from that 3% space, we can generate so much pollution here, and this still spread. And the water body is what takes vehicle all our toxin to different places. So ecologically speaking, 3% is a dangerous piece to strip off. And if we are going to be ecologically conscious, we can strip it. But we can make it back, we can make it pervious and green, environmentally friendly. We still can do that, right? So if we're going to talk about food, beta, and medicine, if you don't address the thing that you're doing to your external environment, then food and medicine, it's a joke. But no, CMOS came. And CMOS is a sea vegetable, a sea algae. And you know what is very powerful about CMOS? It is the very first time you will see a crop. The more you plant this crop, the cleaner the environment gets. And the stronger the ecology gets. And everybody pockets benefit economically. So it brings all three P's in the same direction. And as a result, I said, let me work on CMOS. Not to say to profit, but it is one of the superfoods that I know can heal the people of my community, right? But the taste of the CMOS was what deterred most people from consuming it. So then I connect with some friends, and the mycelium brought me to people like, my good friend here, Will. And I tried mushroom, the psychedelic one. Yeah. And it sent me, I'm a nature person, sorry. And it sent me off. And I came back with different messages and formulations, honestly. To do that, and that. And I was asked to use CMOS. That sea vegetable, I know it from I was a child in my country. We use it a lot, especially in men. So it told me to use CMOS as the base for a medicine for the people of my community. But it is everybody's food. But to give these people a chance to fight the coronavirus or whatever that was out there, they would need to eat CMOS. And CMOS has that main mineral, zinc. But zinc is of no use if you take it just like that. It needs another thing to carry it. Yeah? It needs another vehicle to carry it that was also found in CMOS. So it was a ready-made medicine. But what is interesting about CMOS is that it attaches itself to some structure in the ocean, not necessarily for feeding. it is more like a filter feeder. It just waves itself and it feeds from the current. So it pulls minerals into its structure from the current of the ocean, from the sun, and from the soil. So it pulls the energy from the sun, the sea, and the soil. Only the ether can pull these things into synergy. These minerals make it not only an electric food, but it has living photon from the sun in it as well. So the magic comes when I synergize this base with herbs and spices. That's when the magic came. Those formulations, and I developed 5 different blends of sea moss, and I start taking this to the streets, the communities, and just sharing with my friends first. And when I start getting the feedback, the testimonials, I couldn't stop. Now, things work out in a mysterious way. Because I refused the job, then I start losing a lot. Everything I start losing, including family. You know, and I'm not unique. I lost the jobs and everything. But I was left with sea moss and servicing the people of my community. And when people start to appreciate it, and it start working, they start to show love by giving a contribution to what I was doing. And after 1 year, I'm still doing this, and I've developed 5 potent sea moss blend. The one is called Covalent 33 Therapy, and it is a blend of sea moss, pineapple, ginger, and turmeric. And if you know anything about synergizing medicine, turmeric contains curcumin, but a lot of curcuminoids are in turmeric. But curcumin, I'm going to teach you something today too. Curcumin is one of those antioxidants that can hijack your blood-brain barrier. It can pass your blood-brain barrier and create this antioxidative effect. In other words, it can remove free radicals from that area of the brain. It can remove metals, heavy metals. And people who have suffered from Alzheimer on curcumin have reported really promising results. So curcumin is an antioxidant, cleans up the free radicals from the blood, from the cells, and it works very well with ginger, because ginger contains other compounds called gingerol that works well with curcumin. So when these vehicle themselves together, it opens up the blood vessel and it can go to the destination properly. But we realize now that these compounds can get to their destination safely in a vehicle called sea moss. So sea moss is a vehicle, alkaline vehicle. It is more likened to mucus. When mucosal membrane produce this sticky-like substance called mucus. It's the same thing like sea moss. It's the same thing that is in your lymphatic system. Sea moss is that replacer. So most people is suffering from acidic lymphatic system, lymphatic fluid. Flush it with sea moss. You get the benefit. If you're suffering from thyroid issue, sea moss will bump up your iodine level. If you're struggling with joint issues, the collagens are in sea moss that are there to replace the joint issues, all right? So a lot of that is going on for sea moss, and it is a food that can recover the community from malnutrition and all the other diseases, all right? So I'm here to share more of that with the family. Thank you very much.
And just so I don't, thank you for that, Covalent. And in case I forget at the end, a number of these folks have booths over here. You can head over and learn a little bit more about what they're offering and what they're into, and I highly recommend that you do. This next question does use the word food. We're going to use the pre-Covalent definition of the word food for a second. I do really appreciate that you have taken the time, Covalent, to analyze that word. Words do matter, and as you said, food is the input. It's the inputs around us, the input, the sun, the earth, the company we keep, all of that. So thank you for that. This next question will be the more traditional definition of food. Now, one cannot talk about food as medicine without speaking to the specific practices used to produce said food. And so how do we as community members work with our local growers and farmers to transition to optimal systems for food production? And what are those systems? And Will, I'm going to turn to you first to kick this off because I know you do a lot of work around soil and permaculture and biomimicry, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
How many people, you can raise your hand, know what permaculture is? Okay, a few of you do. So he just said something that most people don't know what he said. And Mike said that he took a permaculture design course. So a lot of you guys don't know what either of them said. Permaculture in its contemporary form in the English language uses the word permanent and culture to create the word. This word was formed in Australia by a couple of Caucasian gentlemen that studied indigenous land practices and decided to create a science around it called permaculture, which is a whole systems design science. So it is a design science, a science that's utilized to design things. And what does it design? It designs whole systems. So systems in entirety. One of the issues that we have in the modern economic system, in the modern social system, is that a lot of our systems are based on parts of ecology and not whole systems in ecology. Our economic system is based on extracting parts of ecosystems, but not based on maintaining whole ecosystems. So in extracting single parts out of something, you get to the point where there's nothing left, especially if you didn't maintain the whole system that was making sure that that part was there to begin with. So that's what happens with a lot of our economic systems. We withdraw things until there's nothing left because we didn't create a whole system for it. So permaculture is a science. And again, as I mentioned, it's based on indigenous land practices because there's a quote, I can't remember where it comes from, but I quite like, if there was ever truly a sustainable civilization, would we even have evidence that they existed, or would they have been so sustainable that their civilization was part of the earth again? And I do believe that that is the case because in a lot of cases, all we can find is little bits of pottery or things that would be deteriorated in a couple thousand or 100,000 more years and back into nature. Unlike our plastics that will be here for hundreds of thousands of years and all the trash that was created. But I studied quantum physics when I dropped out of school. I dropped out of school when I was 16 because it was interfering with my education. And studying quantum physics, I understood that energy cannot be created or destroyed in this universe. So there's no such thing as waste, just stuff in the wrong place. People created the concept of garbage, but there is no such thing as garbage. We're living in a whole system. There's no a way to throw anything. If there isn't a way, you're putting it somewhere else where somebody else is. So in creating whole systems, we don't just create systems of our society that has this away place that doesn't exist or some part of the system that just is cut off. We make sure that we keep everything in a holistic system just the way nature did. There was no trash until humans created the concept of trash. So what does nature do with waste? It uses it to enrich the soil again. I am a firm believer that the soil is the only bank. All banks are a fallacy. Banks are the most evil thing that exists in the world. The soil is the only bank, so I will deposit all of my wealth into the soil. Any waste that I can that is biological anymore, I'll put into the soil, I will deposit into the soil, and then I will use plants and I will use mushrooms to withdraw whatever I want back out from there. I can withdraw sugar, I can withdraw starch, I can withdraw medicinal herbs, I can withdraw medicinal mushrooms from what I do with what I put back into the soil. So permaculture is a means of creating whole systems that utilize biomimicry. As he mentioned, I study biomimicry. What is biomimicry? Bio, life, mimic. I will mimic this thing. I will mimic life. Life has spent millions, hundreds of millions of years of bringing itself into centropy where it works. Where you see those ivies pulling down that tree right there, that's happening because we deforested this area so many times and the big trees want to grow back. but they can't grow back until the nutrients are back into the soil. So the ivy grows up the trees and literally yanks these young trees down that don't have the potential to grow into 100-year-old trees. These are baby trees that are meant to reinvigorate this soil. And this wouldn't even be happening if the bison were still roaming through this area, maintaining perennial grasses that had the most deep roots and maintained the most amazing carbon sequestration system that the earth has ever seen. The plain lands of the United States maintained by the bisons, which were maintained by wolves, which were maintained by the indigenous Native Americans that acted as part of the ecosystem in something that we call permaculture in English. English is a war language, and English is one of the weirdest languages to learn because English picks up a lot of terms and terminologies from places that they went and ravaged. They bring in words like canoe and hurricane that comes from my indigenous people's lands in the Antilles, the higher Antilles, the Taino people of Puerto Rico. We made the words canoe, we made the word hurricane, and the English people came through and didn't know how to describe these things, so they used our word. That's why it's hard for people to learn English, because English adopts a lot of words that doesn't use the same mechanisms to actually make a word. It just took a word from somebody else's language. One of the things that English didn't do is translate what nature is, because up until this modern era where they let women be able to vote, where they freed black people, where they let trans people and everybody else be able to be free finally, those were the people that said, you're a witch, you're a devil, you know how to talk to nature, you're a crazy person, you are gonna get hung, you're gonna get killed. That's what English people did literally until the past 50, 60 years. So this is the first time in the English history that we have people that are allowed to translate nature into English. So we're creating the formulations and creating the linguistic structures necessary to create the systems so that we can interface with this thing that people thought was the devil for so long. So that's where we're at, and we're using permaculture to use the natural systems that have been created, because nature figured out what to do with waste. Nature figured out how to clean water. Nature figured out how to create social systems that created the social creatures that we are. Humans are the ultimate scientific tool designed by nature. Whatever you want to call it, whether you believe that God created humans or whether you believe that nature created humans after time, what's the difference? I don't see any difference in my mind. But whatever you want to believe, I believe that all humans are part of the ecosystem, just like any tree or just like any animal, and everything in nature has a purpose. Everything in nature is unique and is doing some sort of ecological function. So I implore you to find your ecological function and then participate in the whole system that we've been a part of, that we've been distracting ourselves from by damming up the water, by putting shoes on our feet, by closing ourselves in houses away from nature and spending all of our times in air conditioning away from the natural environment. I implore you to recognize yourself in this environment and recognize your position in this world so that we can create a whole system together, because all of you guys are part of it just as much as everything else. And in doing so, we can start to value the things that are the most important to us, which is our ecosystem. We can start to remember that we can think beyond just the 9 to 5 and beyond the Monday through Friday. All of these things, again, are concepts. Humans have this unique ability to look at time the same way we look at space. You can look into a microscope and see a small space. You can look in a telescope and see the big space. You can look at your watch in a 9 to 5 mentality, or you can sit under the tree until you realize the trees are alive and moving just like everything else. But when you're so fast all the time, the trees look like they're not moving at all. So we can use these kinds of things and use these kinds of understandings to find ourselves in this place, to recognize our actions have impact beyond what's directly in front of us. We can get back into the 7 generations mentality, recognize the value of the soil, and start planting things for people that won't be able to enjoy. Plant things for things that you won't be able to eat, because somebody made sure that we had corn and tomatoes and potatoes and all these things that were once weeds. It took generations of people working with their dead ancestors and their unborn grandchildren to create these things that we even enjoy anymore, and we stopped doing that. I think that's what humans are supposed to be doing, is working in generational mindsets. So the last thing I'll just end with that is I implore people to look up Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I believe that's the most English and Western way to introduce people into chakra systems or Kabbalah or these basic understandings of different aspects of life that helps an individual achieve self-actualization. You have to be safe, you have to feel in community, you have to feel respected so that you can actualize who you are and express yourself into the environment. And at Maslow's hierarchy of needs ends at self-actualization, but I believe that it should go on into community actualization, because I believe that we are social creatures. I believe that we are more designed and inclined to cooperate and act in community, but we've been very divisive to the point that we don't even know how to communicate with our neighbors that can speak the same language as us. I think that we're supposed to act into community. So once people self-actualize and respect each other as their expressions, their art, their creation, we can reach community actualization. And from community actualization, we can reach generational actualization, so we can start creating generational technologies and start working with our ancestors and with our unborn grandchildren again.
Let's hear it.
Yeah.
That was beautiful. Thank you. You did bring up indigenous peoples, and I want to step outside the bars of the cage of the civilizational system that we're sort of all in and trapped within. And I want to talk a little bit, Tom, I want to turn it to you and talk a little bit about the Weston A. Price Foundation and the work of Weston Price. He studied indigenous peoples, and part of his research and findings and discoveries have been enshrined and celebrated in the Weston A. Price Foundation. And I wondered if you could walk us through a little bit of what he discovered and how this can apply to the folks on Hoot Hill around what they're putting in their bodies and why that matters.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, guys and lady or woman. So Weston Price. I would say, just to back up a little bit, everybody here is appropriately backing up, is for my role in the ecosystem, I think, is to figure out how to ask and find the foundational question. Because I think if you don't find the foundational question of whatever it is that you're trying to understand, you will be led astray. So just to give you the first example that popped into my head, if you want to know whether this person loves you or not, I'm not sure what the foundational question is, but you could say, well, did she make me dinner? Yes. There, that's the foundational question. That's proof that she loves me. Except it's pretty easy to see that, like, Jack in the Box also made you dinner if you go there. And so that turns out actually not to be the foundational question. And you can do that with just about anything you're trying to understand. What really will tell me what's the truth or not? So when it comes to food and nutrition, people say things like, well, it's got the most minerals in it, or it's grown in the best soil, or it's grown from the sea, or you should be a vegan, or you should be a raw foods person, or you should be a carnivore, or you should take supplements, or you should take vitamin B6 because that makes people the healthiest. But I think it's pretty easy to see, like somebody making you dinner, that that's not actually the foundational question. And the magic of Weston Price was, he was a dentist in the 30s, and he came up with the foundational question. Now, I would point out that foundational questions are often like really simple. In other words, and so in this case, he said, is there anybody out there who has perfect health? And if so, what did they do? You know, how did they live? Did they wear shoes or not?